Strap in for a wild ride through the explosive mind of Friedrich Nietzsche. This 19th century German thinker didn't just push the envelope. He tore it up, set it on fire, danced around the ashes butt naked while playing the piano. Maybe not the last part, but grab your hammers, for smashing idols of course, and prepare to stare into the abyss, because we're about to dive into the deep end of Nietzsche's maelstrom. Before we jump into this philosophical abyss, let's take a moment to meet the man behind the ideas. Friedrich Wilhelm Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a small town in Prussia. Young Fritz, that's what his friends called him, he was this precocious kid who went from writing Latin and Greek at 14 to becoming a university professor at the ripe old age of 24. Talk about overachiever. Can you imagine being his brothers? Why can't you do more like Friedrich? But don't let the academic credentials fool you. Nietzsche wasn't some dusty old professor. He was more like a rock star of the 19th century, complete with an impressive mustache that would make even the most hipster barista weep in envy. Nietzsche's life was a roller coaster of brilliant insights, terrible health, and enough drama to fill a Netflix series. He ends up leaving his teaching post due to health issues. He wanders around Europe like a philosophical nomad and eventually has a mental breakdown in Turin, allegedly after hugging a horse. But we've all been there. And despite his relatively short productive life, he ends up going into full-time care 1889 and dies in 1900, turn of the century. Nietzsche left behind a philosophical legacy that would shake the foundations of Western thought. So let's get in. Imagine walking into a stuffy academic conference and shouting, "God is dead, and we've killed him." Because that's essentially what Nietzsche does with his magnum opus, Thus Spoke Zarathustra. Try saying that like 20 times fast. This thing is part philosophical treatise, part poem, but it's completely mind-bending. So here are some of his key concepts. The first, and this is what you probably know him for, is the death of God. And this isn't Nietzsche being edgy for the sake of it. He's declaring that the Enlightenment and scientific revolution have effectively killed traditional religious beliefs as a source of moral values and meaning. It's like Nietzsche saying, hey, everyone, the cosmic parent's gone, time to grow up and create our own values. Here's the kicker. Nietzsche isn't celebrating this death. He sees it as a profound crisis for Western civilization. It's like we've collectively committed to move this direction, but now we're all standing around awkwardly, not sure what to do next. And his philosophy is all about facing this crisis head on and finding new ways to create meaning, which inevitably leads to the Ubermensch. This is Nietzsche's vision of human potential, someone who creates their own values and meaning in his mind in a world without God. And it's not about being a superhero, it's about transcending traditional morality and becoming truly free. It's like self-help but on steroids. Become who you are, but really become who you are. Because the Übermensch isn't born, they're made. It's about constant self-overcoming, pushing beyond your limits, and creating your own values. It's like Nietzsche saying, don't just be yourself, be your best self, then overcome that self, rinse and repeat until you're so awesome you make your past self look like a potato. And that leads us next to eternal recurrence. And so he says this, imagine if you had to live your life over and over again for eternity, exactly the same way each time. Would you rejoice or despair? And this thought experiment is Nietzsche's ultimate litmus test for life affirmation. It's like a philosophical version of Groundhog Day, but with less Bill Murray and more existential implications. But Nietzsche isn't just saying this actually happens, although who knows, maybe he was predicting quantum immorality. But what he's really doing is challenge us to live in such a way that we would be happy to repeat our lives eternally. It is the ultimate YOLO philosophy, before Drake made it cool. And if this is your only life, make it one worth living again and again. The fourth thing was will to power. And this isn't just about dominating others. For Nietzsche, it's the fundamental drive of all life. It's the will to grow, to overcome, to create. It's like he's saying life isn't just about surviving, baby. It's about thriving. And the will to power is his alternative to Schopenhauer's will to live. It's not just about staying alive, but about expanding, growing, and overcoming resistance. It's like life is one big gym, and we're all here to get philosophical gains. And then the fifth part was master and slave morality. He argues that there are two fundamental types of morality. Master morality, which is based on strength, nobility, and creation of values, and slave morality based on resentment and reaction against the strong. It's a bit like saying there are lion and there are sheep in the moral world, but with the twist that sometimes the sheep convince the lion that being a sheep is morally superior. And Nietzsche sees much of Western a traditional morality as slave morality is a way for the weak to constrain the strong. He's not necessarily endorsing master morality, but he wants us to recognize where our values come from and question whether they truly serve life. Now, this work was so revolutionary that it made conventional philosophers clutch their pearls and reach for the smelling salts. But it wasn't just shocking. His magnum opus changed the entire landscape of modern thought, inspiring everyone from existential philosophers, self-help gurus, and unfortunately even some dictators along the way. So after dropping the God is dead bomb, Nietzsche decides to take a swing at conventional morality, because at this point I've already upset everybody else. And that leads us to beyond good and evil. It is his attempt to, in his mind, demolish traditional ethics and build something new from the rubble. Some of the key ideas were first, perspectivism. Nietzsche argues that there are no objective facts, only interpretations. It's like he's saying there's no view from nowhere, everybody. We're all wearing our own special reality-tinted glasses. Now, this isn't just relativism. Nietzsche thinks some perspectives are better than others, namely those that, and imagine that, affirm life and promote growth. It's like he's saying, sure, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but some opinions are just more life-affirming than others. The second part of this was the critique of objectivity, that he takes aim at the idea of disinterested objective knowledge. So for him, all knowledge is driven by our interests and desires. It's like he's telling scientists, sorry, but your lab coat doesn't make you magically valid or reliable or unbiased. And he sees the pursuit of objective truth as almost this kind of asceticism. It's a denial of life. He's challenging us to recognize how our values and desires shape our understanding of the world. It's like he's the original advocate for checking your philosophical privilege. The third part we come back to is the will to truth. He questions why we value truth so highly. Is it really good for us, or is it also a form of asceticism, a denial of life? It's like he's asking, is ignorance really bliss? And if so, why are we all trying so hard to know everything? Now, he's not anti-truth, but he wants us to examine our motives for seeking truth. Are we doing it for a life-affirming desire for growth or a life-denying asceticism? It's like he's saying, before you seek the truth, make sure you can handle it.
You can't handle the truth!
The fourth part was philosophical prejudices. He argues that most philosophies are just elaborate rationalizations of their author's moral prejudice. It's his way of saying, check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's bad for your health and your entire philosophical system. And so Nietzsche's like the ultimate philosophical detective or conspiracy theorist, always looking for the hidden motive behind grand systems of thought. He's asking us to be more honest about where our ideas come from and what they serve. And then fifth is the free spirit. He champions the idea of the free spirit, someone who can create new values and life beyond conventional morality. It's like he's advocating for philosophical parkour, leaping over established boundaries with style. And the free spirit isn't just a rebel without a cause, they're a creator of new values, someone who can look at the world with fresh eyes and dare to think differently. It's like he's saying, don't just think outside the box, realize there is no box.
Mind's blown.
And this work had ethicists pulling out their hair, if they weren't already bald from contemplation, for decades. It's the philosophical equivalent of a rock star trashed in a hotel room, shocking but also weirdly inspiring. And so, not content with just critiquing current morality, Nietzsche decides, I'm going to dig into its origins, and that's on the Genealogy of Morals. It's his attempt to play historical detective and uncover the crime scene where our values were born. Some of the key concepts we're going to see, some are going to be revisited. First is the master-slave morality. He's going to expand on this idea, arguing that our current morality is largely a slave morality that has triumphed over master morality. It's like he's uncovering a millennial-old conspiracy of the weak against the strong. And he traces how concepts like good and evil evolve over time, arguing that our current moral values aren't actually eternal truths, but products of historical power struggles. It's kind of like a behind-the-scenes tour of morality's sausage factory. Not pretty, but fascinating. And then number two, the second part we're going to see is resentment. This is the resentment of the weak against the strong, which he sees as the root of slave morality. It's like he's saying your morality is just sour grapes dressed up in a fancy philosophical clothing. And Nietzsche argues that slave morality turns weakness into virtue and strength into vice out of resentment. Kind of like this psychological jujitsu move that allows the weak to feel morally superior to the strong. It's like saying, I'm not losing, I'm winning at humility. And then we have bad conscience. He argues that our sense of guilt and sin comes from our animal instincts being turned inward by civilization. It's like he's telling us your conscience is just your inner beast howling because it's been caged. And this internalization of aggression creates what he calls the soul, our inner world of thoughts and feelings. It's like civilization is a pressure cooker, and our psyche is the stew of repressed instincts bubbling inside. And then again, we have an aesthetic ideal. He critiques the glorification of suffering and self-denial in Western culture. For Nietzsche, that is life-denying and needs to be overcome. It's his way of saying stop hitting yourself, philosophically speaking. And this aesthetic ideal promises meaning through self-denial, but he sees it as a cop-out, a way of avoiding the challenges of creating a positive, meaningful life. It's like he's telling us life's a banquet and most poor suckers are starving to death. And then again, he's going to revisit will to power. And here he's going to present this concept as the key to understanding human behavior and history. It's like he's offering us a skeleton key to unlock all of human motivation. And he sees the will to power operating everywhere in our moral systems, our religions, our philosophies. It's not just about domination, but about growth, self-overcoming, and creativity. It's like he's saying life's not just a struggle for survival, it's a struggle for flourishing. And this work, again, it's like a philosophical detective story where the culprit turns out to be all of us. It's been blowing minds, but also inspiring heated debates for over a century. Nietzsche wasn't just a three-hit wonder. He had plenty of other philosophical firecrackers behind that impressively mustached face. First is The Birth of Tragedy. This was actually his first book where he argues that Greek tragedy was born from the union of Apollyon, rational order, and Dionysian, chaotic instinctional forces. It's like he's saying the best art comes from a cocktail of reason, madness, but heavy on the madness. And this work was his attempt to understand the greatness of Greek culture, but also its decline. And then next we have Human, All Too Human. This is a collection of homomorphisms where Nietzsche starts to break away from his early influences. It's kind of like a philosophical butterfly emerging from his chrysalis if the butterfly were into destroying conventional wisdom. And this book marks Nietzsche's turn towards much more of a skeptical, naturalistic philosophy. He starts to see human behavior and beliefs as products of natural, psychological processes rather than metaphysical truths. So he's kind of given us a backstage pass to the human comedy. And then we have Twilight of Idols. This is his attempt to sum up philosophy in a series of rapid-fire attacks on, well, pretty much everything. He's sort of playing philosophical whack-a-mole, but it's Western civilization. The subtitle was How to Philosophize with a Hammer. Pretty much says it all. And here he's not doing a gentle critique. He's smashing idols and trying to wake us up from dogmatic slumbers. It's kind of like a philosophical espresso martini for the brain. And then we have The Antichrist. Despite this title, it is not a black metal album, but it is his all-out assault on Christianity. It's his way of saying, turn the other cheek. How about I turn your worldview upside down? And he sees Christianity as the ultimate expression of slave morality and life denial. And he's not pulling any punches here. It's a full-on philosophical cage match between Nietzsche and 2,000 years of Christian tradition. And so, as you can imagine, he was not very popular with the church. Now, as a Christian professor and pastor, there's a lot about Nietzsche I don't agree with, but I have found him to be a valuable philosopher to read. He helps you question things that you might not have previously questioned. And then he gives us an autobiography with chapter titles like Why Am I So Wise and Why I Write Such Good Books. He invented the philosophical humble brag. And this was written, imagine this, right before his mental breakdown, and it's his most outrageous and self-aggrandizing, but beyond the bombastic, there is this like poignant attempt to sum up his life's work and in his mind secure his legacy. It's like he knew he was writing his own philosophical epitaph. So there you have it. Nietzsche's philosophical framework displayed in all of its glory. His ideas have been debated, misinterpreted, hello Nazis, you got that wrong, and built upon by philosophers, artists, and angsty teenagers for over a century. Some love him, some hate him, but everyone agrees his intellectual dynamite, it did change the game forever. And Nietzsche's influence is harder to pin down than a greased pig at a country fair, mainly because it's everywhere. He's been claimed by existentialists, postmodernists, anarchists, and even some particularly edgy motivational speakers. His critique of traditional values and call for a reevaluation of all values really set the stage for much of what we saw and see in the 20th and 21st century in philosophy and critical theory. He's had a huge impact in literature as well as psychology and also in politics in ways that have been used and abused across the political spectrum. So why should we care about this mustachioed madman of philosophy in the 21st century? Well, buckle up, because Nietzsche's relevance is coming to you like a philosophical freight train. First is his idea of the death of God. In our increasingly secular world, Nietzsche is warning about the consequences of losing traditional sources of meaning and value. That is more relevant than ever, whether you follow Jesus, whether you're another religion, or whether you're irreligious at all. And then second, perspectivism in the age of alternative facts. In an era of social media echo chambers and fake news, Nietzsche's ideas about the subjective nature of truth and the importance of questioning our own perspectives, it's crucial. It's like he predicted Twitter wars before the internet was even a twinkle in ARPANET's eyes. And then the Ubermensch and self-improvement. From Silicon Valley disruptors to Instagram influencers preaching self-actualization, our culture is obsessed with the idea of becoming our best selves. Nietzsche's concepts of constant self-overcoming speaks to this zeitgeist, albeit with a lot more depth and a lot more questioning and a lot less avocado toast. And then will to power in politics and business, whether it's the cutthroat world of the corporate ladder or the power plays of international politics, Nietzsche's insights into human motivation and the will to power are as relevant as ever. It's like he wrote the first 48 Laws of Power, but with a lot more philosophical street cred. And then the critique of morality in a world grappling with complex ethical issues from AI to climate change. His radical questioning of traditional morality challenges us to think deeper about our values and their origins. It's like he's the devil's advocate in every single ethics debate, keeping us kind of on our philosophical toes. And then embracing life in the face of absurdity. In a world that can often seem chaotic and meaningless, Nietzsche calls to affirm life and create our own meaning resonates very strongly. His philosophy is like an existential pep talk for the modern age. So there you have it, Nietzsche, the philosophical dynamite that's still exploding minds over a century later. So whether you see him as a brilliant visionary or a dangerous radical, or more than likely both, there's no denying the seismic impact he had on modern thought. And as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century, Nietzsche's ideas continue to challenge, provoke, and inspire. His call to question everything, create our own values, they still echo through the halls of academia and on the pages of edgy Instagram quotes alike. And if, like me, you're a follower of Christ, I think he's one of the best people you can read to really understand secular culture. So the next time life gets you down, just ask yourself, what would Nietzsche do? The answer is probably something outrageous, profound, and utterly life-affirming, and if all else fails, grow a magnificent mustache. After all, in the eternal recurrence of all things, you might as well look philosophically fabulous.